Hello and welcome to Success Stories. I'm your host, Alan Mendenhall. Success Stories is a show of the Sorrell College of Business at Troy University that highlights the lives and careers of people who have accomplished great things. I'm joined here today by Judge Jeffrey Sutton of the U.S. Court of Appeals from the Sixth Circuit. Judge Sutton, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and you've been very kind to fly all the way down from Ohio in the middle of a tropical storm.
Yeah, managed to avoid it.
Well, I wanted to start by asking about your childhood, about your studies and your interest. I know you were born in Saudi Arabia, and I'm sure when you were young, you probably had no idea that you would grow up to be a judge. Few judges I know were born thinking, I want to grow up and be a judge. So tell us a little bit about your childhood and what you were interested in and what you studied.
Well, you're quite right about the judge point. I didn't have any family members that had been in law, either on my mom's or father's side of the family, so that wasn't something I would have thought much about. And I will say, if someone had told me as a kid that I would have to write 1 to 2 10-page opinions a week for the rest of my life, I would have said, you got to be kidding me. So yeah, the start in Saudi Arabia, my grandparents, my father's parents, were missionary teachers in Jordan and Lebanon. So he grew up there, spoke Arabic. He was educated in this country, but went back to work in Saudi Arabia, and my brother and I were born there, which explains that, and lived there for about 3 years before we moved mainly to the East Coast. I will say that experience, I really loved the Middle East. I thought for a long time I would go into diplomacy, and particularly with focus on the Middle East, and that almost happened after college. I took the exams, had a slot, but it didn't. So I grew up on the East Coast primarily, and I suppose like a lot of kids, I really love sports, to be honest with you. That was probably the thing that I thought about first when I got up, and if you dreamed, it was not dreaming about law or business, it was dreaming about playing sports, and probably kept those dreams longer than I should have, longer than a mature person would have.
You weren't on the bench yet, I take it.
No. So that was a big part of my middle school, high school. But I did enjoy reading. Probably introduced in part by reading sports biographies. But that wasn't all I read. And so I was a decent student, and I think, If I look back on reasons why I might have ended up in law, one of them had to be that I ended up enjoying reading as a kid, even though the real angle was probably sports. In college, I thought...
and this is Williams College.
Williams College, right, a small liberal arts school in northwestern Massachusetts, where I met my wife, who's from Ohio, and I went there to play soccer and studied history, and I guess if I'd been asked to predict then what I would do, it would have been teaching and coaching. I stayed at the school for a semester afterwards, helped to coach the soccer team, eventually did teach for 2 years, taught 7th grade geography, high school history, coached the soccer team, the baseball team. And it's really strange that I left that in a lot of ways, because I really enjoyed it. My wife was teaching. We enjoyed the kids. It's a job that takes a lot of energy, but I think we had a lot of energy. And for whatever reason, maybe I was impatient. Maybe that's a feature of youth, that when you're young, you're impatient. It's hard to imagine doing anything for 40 years. So I then decided, well, let me pursue these other 2 possibilities, one being foreign service, the other being law. Got into law school at Ohio State, and started because I had passed the foreign service exams, but they didn't have a slot for me. And then halfway through that first year of law school, I had to make a choice. Am I going to go to the foreign service, where they now had an opening, or stay in law? And one of those, I thought was a very small decision, became a very big decision. I initially decided not to start in January of my 1L year, and said, well, I'll do the foreign service when I finished 1L year. That way I can finish law school in D.C. if I want. And by the time 1L year ended, I realized I really like law. And I had great professors. They really energized me. I had been out for a while from college, so perhaps I was ready for school, so ready to do some reading, maybe appreciate it a little more than I had before. how much fun it is to be a student. And so I stuck with law school and had the good fortune of having a couple clerkships, including clerking for Justice Powell and Justice Scalia. And those were probably also really big events. They're big events in the sense if you clerk, I suppose it's a nice credential. It's nice to have on your resume. Maybe it helps you get the next job. But for me, what really made a difference was how much I learned from these two individuals. So Justice Powell was kind of the quintessential Southern gentleman. He was a Virginian, had run the Hunt and Williams firm, been president of the ABA, just an incredibly gracious human being, and just got along with everybody. And so this one year, I'm his one clerk that year, and I really got so much out of learning about how he lived his life. And he was a very successful lawyer in practice and then successful justice, but he had a great family. I mean, he had 4 kids. He had great relationships with all of his kids, wonderful relationship with Mrs. Powell, lots of deep friendships. So that was really a great experience. I mean, I probably learned to love law more. Maybe it helped me when I was practicing law because Justice Powell was one of the great practitioners of law in America at that time. And then, I guess the other thing is, when it comes to my job judging, Justice Powell did it quite a bit differently from Justice Scalia. So I had to learn the Powell language. And when you're young, it's nice to learn different languages of your profession. So even if I'd been an engineer, it would have been nice to learn the way one engineer does it versus the way another does it. And here I was learning from two of the great lawyers of their generations and how they spoke the language of law, how they practiced law. Then Justice Scalia on the other side was this, boundless energy, always talking about the writing, would read aloud his opinions to us. And so that had a really deep impact on me as well. And I guess both of them maybe lit a fire under me. I don't know about your path, but it does seem you can really be lucky to have people that cross your path at some point that both take an interest in you, have something worth following, like an approach they're mentoring you, but there's an example that's really worth following. And maybe those things together, they really light a fire. And those were 2 big events for me.
Mentorship is so important. It's so important for people in establishing themselves and having someone really just to look out for you when you're trying to find your way. I want to mention to our viewers that Judge Sutton has just come out with a new book called The Essential Scalia. And again, he mentioned that he had clerked for Justice Scalia. The co-editor of that volume is a friend of ours named Ed Whelan, and they actually clerked for Justice Scalia together. So tell us a little bit about Justice Scalia's influence on you.
Yeah, well, he was really fun to clerk for. If you read a Justice Scalia opinion, you might think he would be a tough boss because he's quite uncompromising about the law, but he was actually really, really easy to work with, very funny. The thing that he did is he had such a high standard. I mean, he's a beautiful writer. I mean, he's one of the great writers to ever serve on the U.S. Supreme Court. And he's a great writer just in terms of American letters and American literature. So you knew that going in. You couldn't not know that. And that made the environment a really fun environment because everybody fed off that energy and they knew they couldn't write like him, but a young law clerk could try, you could dream, and you could watch really closely what he did and watch his habits, try to make his habits your habits. So that was really, really valuable. And one of the things you did as a law clerk is you'd write him memos, but he would let us write first drafts of opinions. And that was really fun because he worked really hard to try to do something he might use. Quite often came up short.
You probably wanted to impress him too a little
We did
bit.
want to impress him. He's hard to impress. But he would eventually spin our straw into his gold. But that was valuable because you watched him do it. I mean, you would work. I dealt with the blank page. I had tried to write a draft opinion in this area. And now I could watch how, the master did it. And that you really can learn a lot. I mean, I suppose a painter that's working with the master painter, you're going to learn a lot. And here we're working really intimately with each other. I do the first draft. He comes back and puts his approach on it. Then we go back and forth about the law and the organization, and it's quite an experience.
That is quite an experience, and one that very few people would know about. So that's a significant thing. I'm curious. You had practice experience in both private practice and as a public official as Solicitor General of Ohio. Do you think it was important for you to see both sides of the law, to do the government work and to do the private practice?
Oh, I think I was so lucky that I got to do all of that. I mean, one thing about law is you can use a law degree in so many ways. You can teach private practice, public service, courts, right. I mean, there's just so many things you can do. And for me, who probably has a short attention span from time to time, that was really great. But I will tell you one story along the way, which, it's just so funny how things work out. I had finished clerking. I was married. I guess at this point we already had 2 children. We were thinking of a third. I was in private practice, which pays well. You can pay off your loans. You can afford a house. My wife was staying home with our children. That was something we wanted. And along comes this opportunity to be the Solicitor General of Ohio. So that would be someone working in the Attorney General's office of the state of Ohio, working with the Ohio Attorney General, a woman named Betty Montgomery. And a pretty good job, a job with some responsibility, but it would be a pay cut. And, it would, working for state government perhaps didn't seem quite as elite or impressive as Jones Day, prestigious as Jones Day. And I almost didn't take that job.
Wow.
After I went to interview, I thought, oh, where's the free soda and coffee? And people aren't dressed as well, and the office isn't quite as fancy. And the very worst thought I had, I'm so embarrassed to say this, I thought maybe it was beneath me. And I'm just so disappointed I had that thought, because the great irony of it all, and my wife was so great about this. She said, oh, Jeff, you'll love this job. You should take it. And so she urged me to take it. And lo and behold, a job I almost didn't take, thought maybe was beneath me, was the best job I ever had in law.
Wow.
So my 3.5, 4 years there made my closest friends in law, had my most enjoyable experience as an advocate, getting to argue cases in the U.S. Supreme Court, in the state courts, the courts of appeal. And it was all because I somehow was willing to try something different, because this was not a typical path at the time to go from private practice into a state AG's office, so maybe that was affecting me. So I look back on it and I just say how lucky I was willing to take that gamble, because, and it ended up being very helpful to me in becoming a judge and a lot of other reasons, but the very best part was I just enjoyed it so much. The other thing about it that I think was the reason I took the job, and it's a young person's curse, is you start out, you get your degree, you become a professional, a teacher, whatever it is you're doing, and people don't take you quite as seriously as you'd like because of your youth. And if you look young, that makes it even worse. They take you even less seriously. And so as a young lawyer, I was not getting to go into court. I was not getting to argue cases, and I really wanted responsibility. I just wanted to try it, to see if I liked it, to see if I could be any good at it. And that was the main reason I took the job. And in retrospect, that was true, that going to public service is a really great way to be the one who has responsibility, to be the one that gets the argument, to be the one that writes the brief and puts their name on it, and to do some really fun, important cases for the state of Ohio during those almost 4 years. And so I just look back and think what a blessing that was, that I absolutely had the opportunity, took it, and then really was able to run with it.
So you've been on the Sixth Circuit now for 18 years roughly. When President George W. Bush nominated you, where were you when you got the phone call?
Yeah, so I'd heard a little bit. There were 2 openings on the Sixth Circuit at the time. I was just 40 years old. I was probably a little afraid to hope or dream for something like that, on the theory I'd be disappointed if I didn't get it. There were a couple other names being considered. one of the people, those people did get it. And I did learn that there were some people in the White House counsel's office that were interested in having me be the nominee. And then I'm trying to think. So I'd interviewed for it, and maybe after the interview, I had a sense that that this was a realistic possibility. And I'm sad to say I can't tell you the exact day of the exact phone call, but I can say we had our hearing. So you get nominated, then you have a hearing in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and this is spring of 2001. So
I won't tell you where I was. I was in college.
Is that right? Young boy. And so Bush, of course, had just gotten elected, and he nominates a group of 11 Court of Appeals judges to start. And 3 of that group, myself, Judge Cook, my colleague in the Sixth Circuit, and John Roberts, now the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, we were the first 3 to have a hearing. Wow. So we went to D.C. to practice for a hearing, do murder boards, moot courts, whatever you want to call it. And the next day, control of the Senate switched because Senator Jeffords, the senator from Vermont, decided to caucus with the Democratic Party rather than the Republican Party. And since it was 50-50, that flipped it. So control of the Senate went to the Democratic Party. And that meant we not only didn't have a hearing the next day, we didn't get a hearing for 2 years. And so we had to wait we didn't get a hearing. And it was really because the Senate in 2002 flipped back from Democrat to Republican, which gave a lot of the nominees a chance for a hearing. So we had to wait 2 years for the hearing. Wow. So that was a long time.
Wow. Well, judges tend to have an aura about them, and they look so distinguished in their robes, and it's easy for people to forget that these judges weren't born being judges. What was it like when you just walked into the office for the first time and you were given your docket and said that your first cases you were going through? What was that like?
Well, some parts of the adjustment were not that hard, and some were hard. So what was not that difficult is I'd been doing appellate practice for quite a while by then. So in some ways, it all felt very familiar. I'd clerked for several years for several judges and justices. I had a sense of how the appellate process worked. Probably had a pretty good sense for maybe 2/3 of the issues. They were just pretty familiar with things I'd done. And it's a reading and writing job, and that's what I've been doing, reading and writing. So in one sense, day one wasn't a lot like that different from the day before when I wasn't a judge. But there were some changes. So one, it's a very small group. I've been at a law firm that was 2,000 lawyers at the time, Jones Day, and by the time I left, I was working with junior partners, pretty old people that had been practicing for a while. And now I had 4 law clerks, most of whom were right out of law school. So that was a big change. And so the team was smaller, and a lot of mentorship, teaching, which I really enjoyed. And my clerks are wonderful. I've really been blessed with great law clerks. So the group was a little different. The other really big change is in practice, this was true whether in government or private practice, there's just a lot of communication going on. You're getting emails, cell phone calls, texts, phone calls, conference calls. Your day just seems like just constantly moving, very little time to stop and think. And being a Court of Appeals judge, people don't call you. You're kind of left alone for the most part. And in one sense, that was good. I had more time to read and write, so you could really work on the opinions. But I'm probably 50% introverted and 50% extroverted. So the extroverted part of me was not being fed. And I used to tell people those first couple of years that if someone called me in the morning, say 10 a.m., I would tell my assistant, tell him I'll call him back in the afternoon. And it wasn't because I was too busy to take the call. I just wanted something to look forward to. I just wanted human contact outside the 4 law clerks and the judicial assistant. But that's, I think I've adjusted in 18 years. I teach a lot, I write a lot, I speak a lot. Everybody has to kind of take the job and adapt to it. And for me, there was a little adaptation
Well,
that
I'm
came
glad
with.
you mentioned your clerks as well, because you're not just a jurist, but you're also an employer. What do you look for when you're hiring clerks? What type of skill sets, or what are you looking at in their background?
Yeah, I mean, so every judge would say the same thing at one level for sure, that obviously it's nice if they had good grades, college, law school, they've gone to a decent school, that helps. There's so many people that have those qualities that I don't think that really distinguishes. So for me, it's really neat if I can somehow get a sense that this person really loves law. Like this is someone who just is really engaged in it, will be excited to have a new project, even a hard new project. It's a lot easier to do the job when you're a group of people that are all excited about the issues and really trying to find the right answer. So if people can convey that to me, that helps. Obviously it's a writing intensive job, so I realize they're going to grow once they come to the court, but it's nice if they like writing and they've had some experience with it. Then there's intangibles. I mean, they've got to get along. Lawyers sometimes can be a little argumentative, maybe even arrogant, and I don't mind argument and debate, but I don't want it for argument's sake, and I certainly don't like arrogance. Because it's a small group.
Yeah.
That wouldn't work very well if someone had a too big a personality. Other intangibles, character's just so big in everything, and
you interview these people too. This is not just looking at a piece of paper. They are coming in and they're interviewing with you, and probably prior clerks as well.
They interview the current clerks and me separately, and I'm just trying to get a sense of grit. How do they do if someone pushes back or they have a hard project? Can they plow through it? I have lunch with them once or twice a week. In COVID, it's probably 4 or 5 times a week. So I have lunch with them a lot. Believe it or not, one thing I like to know is this someone I want to have lunch with?
Yeah,
are they an interesting person? Are they engaged in the world? Am I going to have to make conversation with them? And, I'd much rather have someone who's interesting and has opinions about what's going on in life, wants to learn. And those often go along with good conversationalists.
That's interesting, and it makes a lot of sense. I suspect that carries over to all kinds of fields and industries. People want to work with people they get along with,
and know how to say things in interesting ways. Can take something, a body of knowledge, think about it, and then present it in an interesting way, a way that engages you. Maybe it's slightly clever.
Yeah.
Those are really valuable qualities.
Well, the principal intended audience for this show is a student that is looking for what to do, is unsure about what to do, or maybe knows exactly what they want to do, or think they know what they want to do. What do you say to the undergraduate student who is uncertain about a major or uncertain about a career, and what does that person do?
Yeah. Well, I know your pain. That was me. I did not know what I wanted to do in college. I didn't know what I wanted to do after college. I wasn't even sure in law school what I wanted to do, and sometimes was really paralyzed by it. So I look back at that. I mean, first of all, if you have the good fortune to be the other person that knows what they want to be, they want to be a nurse, they want to be a lawyer, a doctor, that's a real blessing, because you just do it, and that's awesome, and then you can focus on other things. Where do you want to live, and who do you want to live life with, and how exactly do you want to do that profession? But I do think a lot of other people fall into the camp I fell into, that just not sure exactly what to do. And something about the modern world maybe makes it harder. We have so much information at our fingertips, which seems to present more choices. And of course, more choices adds to complexity. I look back on it, and I wish I had maybe just been a little more relaxed about it. I love law. I'm a great defender of law. Even though there were no lawyers in my family, I now have 2 of my kids that are going to law. So I really love it. But I think I could have been just as happy being a teacher, a coach, a foreign service officer, definitely a professional athlete. And that's sometimes it's worth remembering that it's true you only have one life. It's true you're probably just going to do one, at most 2 careers. And maybe that makes these choices seem so big, but maybe they're not so big. Maybe what's more important is how you do it, and are you the kind of person that's a good person, that develops character and is grounded and is follows the golden rule, and maybe just pursues excellence. So to me, someone that focuses on those things, and then learns from their experiences is probably it's gonna work out really well. But the other thing I would say is you got to just try things. So I was a good example of someone who taught. I was a paralegal, I was a coach, and those are, if you're not sure what to do, having an experience is really helpful, because you learn, oh, I like a desk job, or I can't stand a desk job, or I want to teach because I want to be with people, or I want to coach because I want to be outside. And so if you don't have a certainty about which path, it does seem really valuable to just have summer jobs or a couple jobs out of college that allow you to just realize, oh boy, that's really hard for me. That doesn't work very well. Or, whoa, there's something that surprises me about that. And that'll help you with developing opinions. But, to me, everyone wants to have a calling. And I feel like I've really developed a calling in law, but that doesn't mean I was born to have only one calling. I really think it's just one of those things. And you stop changing jobs when you get married and have kids. I mean, you gotta just focus on something, and that's what happened with law. And I was really lucky with some great opportunities, but I'm really confident I would be just as happy if I'd stayed with middle school teaching, coaching,
and
foreign service.
You've remained a teacher, not just in the capacity as a mentor to your clerks, but you teach at several law schools. Right now, during COVID, you're teaching at many law schools because of the capabilities of Zoom and online education.
Well, maybe you're putting your finger on the key point. You are who you are, and I must like teaching, right? I didn't stay as a full-time teacher, but most of these places I'm teaching for free. There's no economic reason to do this. I obviously much like it, and so trust yourself to once you're in your job, channel the energy, the desires you have to do certain things, that you'll find ways to do them. And obviously in Columbus, Ohio, I decided to teach at Ohio State. That was a really easy, natural thing to do. I've coached all my kids' teams, so I obviously didn't give up teaching. I still love traveling. I'm not involved in foreign affairs. That's true, diplomacy, but hey, I'm almost 60. I still have time.
You've got plenty of time, and
so do it all.
That's right. Do it all. Well, Judge Sutton, thank you so much for your time today, and for talking to us, and for your advice to students in particular. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have safe travels home.
Thank you, Alan. I've really enjoyed this, and what a great program, and good for the students. They're so lucky to have you. So,
well, thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you. This has been a show of the Sorrell College of Business Success Stories. We wish you all much success.